First question, the whole interview. What's your favorite thing about having a younger brother?
I like to help him. I flip him over on his back and he tries to roll over. He's really good at that. And also, when he's crying, I give him his binky.
Okay. So how did you feel when you saw him for the first time?
Awesome. I smiled. A huge smile.
Huge smile? You think you can show me the big smile? That is huge. I see the veins in your neck. That is awesome. What did you think when she was gone?
Thought my brother would come soon and it would just be a miracle.
With TJ, we had tried for, it was 5 years after we got married before we had TJ. And so we were very excited to have him. And everything was going great. And we ended up moving to Wyoming because Jeff was going to law school. And my water broke at 35 weeks with him. And the doctors decided they didn't want to risk infection, so they would just induce me right away. And so he came 5 weeks early. And he was pretty small. He was 4 pounds, 12 ounces. He was just a joy. And the doctor said, we have no idea why this happens. It's probably a fluke. Sometimes this happens and it probably won't ever happen again. And so we didn't really worry too much about it with another one. And then we both come from very large families. And so we both wanted more children. So when TJ was a year old, or before he was a year old, we started trying again. And it took a while, and then we were finally expecting again. We tell everybody we're so excited, and then we end up miscarrying that first child, and that was very hard to deal with. And then subsequently we had 2 more miscarriages, and each one was hard. There's no way to get over that. There's no way to make that any easier. And each one felt like a part of our heart was being ripped out. But each one made us have to draw closer together and have to draw closer to the Lord because there was no other way to get through it.
It's kind of a heart-wrenching experience when both people are so emotionally invested in the expansion of the family. And for me, when people would just tell us to suck it up or buck up and move on, try again, it was the most aggravating thing in the world because it was a statement made in complete ignorance. They didn't know the full set of circumstances that we were dealing with. They didn't understand what medically we had been told. They didn't understand how excited we had been to have another kid after trying for so long and having so much difficulty getting pregnant. And then that extreme level of emotional commitment is almost completely invalidated when people say, oh, it happens all the time, it's not a big deal, try again. And so for us, for me in particular, it was aggravating. I got really frustrated and snapped at people for trying to be so just emotionally callous to our situation. And so when we were in the middle of this strange circumstance, we were away from family, and in a lot of ways, all we had to rely on was each other, because nobody else was there. I mean, there were people in the ward, people in the neighborhood, people at school who would offer their condolences, but there wasn't a real presence like family who would come and just tell us it was going to be okay and commiserate with us and validate our emotions a little bit.
When we found out we were expecting with Gideon, at least I didn't even want to acknowledge. For the first month, I just didn't even tell anyone. And finally I said, Jeff, I think expecting, and he said, yeah, I know. But I had to acknowledge it to myself and then call a doctor, and it was a new doctor by then, and just say, this is my situation. I need to get in right away. I don't want to get too attached if something's going to happen. So we go in 6 weeks and hear the heartbeat, and it's very, it's a good thing to hear. We're happy, but we're still apprehensive because, you know, that's happened before. We've heard the heartbeat, and so I went back at 10 weeks and no heartbeat. The doctor couldn't find one, and, you know, my heart's just dropping out, and I just feel like I can't go through this again. I cannot do this again. Help me, help me, help me. And I just sent up the most heartfelt prayer right then. I said, if I need to go through this again, help me, but I don't want to do it. And so they did an ultrasound. They said maybe we just can't hear the heartbeat with our monitor. So they did the ultrasound, and there he was, strong heartbeat. Okay. Now let's make it to 14 weeks. And we get to 14 weeks and heartbeat's strong, and we finally, a week after it was Thanksgiving, we finally told family and finally let ourselves get excited about it and say, okay, let's start thinking of names. Let's start planning our family. This could be a thing that could happen. This maybe is what we've been praying for.
I would work, come home, try and spend about an hour with TJ, and then study till midnight, 1 or 2 in the morning. And then get up in the morning and do it again. On Saturdays, I would study for 6 hours or 8 hours or 10 hours. And I did this for most of January and February.
Every appointment, we heard everything looks great. This is normal, doing well. And I would bring up, my water did break with my last one. Is this something I need to worry about? Do I need to go on bed rest? Nope. It's probably a fluke. You're looking fine. There's no reason for your water to break. Absolutely not. And the day my water broke, I had an appointment with the doctor. Went to the doctor. He checked me out. And it wasn't even a point where he was just listening to the heartbeat. That's all he did. But he said, you know what? You're looking great. I know you're concerned about your water breaking. It's not, I almost guarantee it's not going to happen. And so we said, okay, great. Went home. A couple hours later, walk into the park with my son, and my water breaks. This can't be happening. This is not real. Maybe this is not what I think it is. And so we went to the park, and I was in denial. Got home and felt some more, and so I thought, okay, call the doctor. He said, come in right away. So I called Jeff, and he had just finished taking the bar about 30 minutes earlier. He was driving home after 2 months of studying. We haven't seen him. Driving home and meet me the doctor. So he went right there, and I got to the doctor, and he's like, didn't I just see you today? Yeah, my water just broke.
From the get-go, I thought it was the most wonderful miracle that it had happened when it did, instead of the night before. I mean, even the night before, the week before, because I had really committed to taking the bar, and I needed to do it, and had felt pushed and prompted like that was the right course for my life. And as I'm in the hospital that first night, all I could think was, if this had to happen, it couldn't have come at a better time. It couldn't have worked out in a better situation.
Like Jeff said, I could not imagine if it had happened the day before or a couple hours before. I wouldn't have been able to get a hold of him. You know, if it happened the day before, he would have had one more day of his test to take. Just the time it happened, that in itself was a miracle to us, that the Lord would see that, and you know, it had to happen, but all these little things that happened that were so amazingly wonderful to make it work out. I mean, we were living in Utah. Our 3 miscarriages were in Wyoming. And if this had happened there, we would be down in Denver with no family. Here we had so many family members that could come and help support us, that could watch TJ, that could be there for Jeff. And that in itself was another blessing. So the first couple days in the hospital, it was pretty scary. It was pretty intense, painful. Just, you know, getting all the IVs and getting the medicines and the shots and all the doctors that would come in and tell us, well, if your baby's born in the next few days, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to be wrong with him. This is his chance of survival. This is such and such. And then we had doctors say, well, we really hope that you can go 48 hours. Go 2 days, that's what we're hoping. And no getting out of bed, no doing this and that. And so it was it was intense. There was so much going on. It was scary. I didn't want to see anybody. People think, can we come visit? I'm like, no, I didn't think I would go into labor any second. I didn't want people there. And I was I had felt at peace when we first got there, but then the fear sets in. And, you get a little scared and you say, okay, I don't know if I can go through this. How are we going to do this? And so those first few days, and then I would sit there and I felt sorry for myself. Like, oh, I have to be in this hospital room. I can't be with my son. I can't be with my husband. It's really not a fun thing to do. And they keep coming in and giving me new IVs, and they keep missing the veins, and it really hurts. And I just, woe is me, right? And then those first 2 days went by, and then the weekend came, and then the weekend left, and I'm still pregnant. I'm still here. And I started thinking, okay, well, maybe we can make it to 7 days. Maybe we can make it, which is what they said, 7 days is what is the longest people usually would ever go after your water breaks and after you've already started those contractions, which they had stopped. And Sunday, more contractions came. They were able to stop those, but they said if any more come, we're not going to stop them again because it probably means you have an infection, which is the big worry.
Leaving her every night was not a good thing for my emotional well-being because she was getting poked and prodded, and she would cry every time I'd leave, and we'd talk on the phone and she'd cry, and she'd talk to TJ and she would cry, and so it's emotionally draining because there's nothing you can do. The only option we had was for her to be in bed at the hospital. They weren't going to let her check out and do a bed rest at home. She had to be where she was. And so it was really rough on me and TJ because he was still in school, and then after school he would go hang out with friends or with family until I was able to get home from work, and then we'd go to the hospital and visit Mom for an hour or two, and then we'd go home and do it again the next day.
I've been reading my scriptures. I've been had a few more visitors, and I was feeling a little, okay, I can do this. This is amazing. We made it to 7 days. The doctor said if you get to 10 days, it's a miracle. So we're just hoping for 10 days. And then I'm sitting in my room, and I'm in the dark, just feeling like I'm in this hospital bed. This is so hard. All these things that are happening to me. And I sit there and I close my eyes, and then I think about my son, TJ. And I think, well, what if he was in a hospital bed? What if he had to have all these tubes in him and people poking him and him being scared and lonely? And I thought about all the parents who have to have that happen. They have their children in a hospital bed, and they look at their child and they see them going through this hardship, and they would do anything to take the place of their child. And I was told right then that I was being given that opportunity. I was being given an opportunity to be in a hospital bed so my son didn't have to. And that changed my whole perspective. And I'm so grateful that I was given that gift from the Holy Spirit to know that this was my sacrifice for my son. And when you put it that way, a mother will do anything to sacrifice for their son. I could do this. I can do this. I can go as long as you want me to. I can be in a hospital bed. Great. Because he won't have to. And every day that I was in the hospital was 3 days he didn't have to be in the hospital.
And after her paradigm shift, if you want to call it that, we'll steal Covey's terminology, it was a good thing every time we got to say goodnight and she still had not delivered the baby. It was a good thing every time we'd get up in the morning and she was doing okay. The doctor had come in and checked on her and said, "You look great, hang on, keep your chin up, keep going strong, here's another day." And at the same time, it was another day of him saying, "Keep going as long as you can, but we could have the baby today." So every other day she's going in for an ultrasound. And it got to the point at about 5 weeks where they looked at the ultrasound and the baby was showing some signs of shunting, which basically means that there's not enough good circulation in the body for the whole body to get the bloodstream that it needs. And so the brain kind of starts to pick and choose which portions of the body are the most important, which means that developmentally, not as much is happening and the baby isn't growing as well. And so they looked at that and decided, there's no sign of infection, which is always the biggest risk, but if he's not growing and progressing in the same way, it's probably better to bring him here to deliver him and then use the medical technology that we have to help him get back on that growth pattern.
So after 5 weeks and every day thinking, the baby could come anytime, suddenly the baby was coming and I didn't feel ready for it yet. This can't be happening, this is weird. With TJ, they had induced me, so I had felt the labor pains, I had felt that process, and then he was born. And then with the C-section, they said, okay, at 4 o'clock, we're gonna go in and we're gonna take your baby out. So they came in and they prepped me, and those hours went by pretty quickly, and then suddenly I'm being wheeled in, and it was very scary. It was, to me, it was very scary. Being wheeled in, and I had made so many good friends in the hospital during this time. Different nurses and different techs and different people that I'd worked with. That in the delivery room there were lots of people in there, and a bunch of nurses would come in and just hold my hand just to be there for me, and because he wasn't allowed in there until after my epidural. And so, one of my nurse friends, she held my hand and she talked me through it, and the doctors came in, they're like, you're doing great. And it was just so nice because I recognized all these faces of people, and it was like everyone's cheering for me. Everyone's helping me get through this. And so then they delivered the baby, and we were worried because they had said that they were thinking he would be about 2'11" when he was born. So we were worried, are his lungs going to be developed, or is his heart going to be able to be okay, and what's going to happen? And so they brought him out, and it was C-section, and suddenly all I'm hearing is people screaming. And that's all I could hear. And I was like, what is going on? And then I realized people were saying, he's breathing, do you hear him? He's screaming. And I'm like, I can't hear anything, you guys are yelling at me. And so they calmed down, and I heard him scream. And I heard him cry. He wasn't really screaming, he was crying, and I heard him cry. And Jeff was right by my head, and he said, he's crying, Rachel. He's just fine. He's beautiful. You have a beautiful boy. And, so I'm craning my neck, trying to see him, and he's over there being worked on by the whole neonatal team. They're scrubbing him down, making sure he's okay. And they were able to even wrap him up in a towel and bring him right up to my head and let me see him before they had to whisk him away.
She was somewhat removed from reality because of the drugs and the pain. And I was kind of disappointed they didn't let me actually watch the procedure. They had a couple interns in there, or a couple residents in there that were kind of training, so there was not a lot of room around the bed. But once he was pulled out, they wrapped him up, and the neonatal team took him over to another corner and started to clean him off, squeegee his nose out a little bit, and he started breathing and started crying. And that was such a shock because they were ready with every sort of intubation, breathing apparatus, heart apparatus, every type of thing that you could come up with. And they had him on a nasal oxygen for about 8 seconds. And then he was breathing just fine. And so, he looked just tiny. He was not super short, but he was 3 pounds, and they were stunned that he was 3 pounds. I kind of figured that he would be a little bit bigger than they predicted, but he was healthy. I mean, it was a surreal thing because it was just this little doll, and he was moving and wiggling and breathing, and they cleaned him off and wrapped him up and took him over to Mom, and she was able to see him for a couple seconds, and then I said goodbye to her, and they put the baby in the isolette, and we went over to the NICU, and they started putting tubes in him and putting oxygen and checking his temperature and everything else. But I mean, right from the get-go, he was fighting hard.
A couple days when we were in the hospital, then when I finally the doctors cleared wheelchair ride. So I got a wheelchair ride into the NICU, and they showed us, they said, this is your baby's spot. We've got it all ready. And they showed us all the equipment and what all of it did. This is for his heart. This is for his lungs. This is for his, everything. There's all, it's just really intense. All these things that would be going on and hooked to your baby. And when I got to go see him, all these machines are against the wall, not having to be used. He was in his little bed, and when I first saw him, he had a tube for his feeding. They put through his nose. We're not supposed to, ask questions or talk about any of the other babies that we saw in there, but there's children that were born earlier than our son, and 28 weeks, and we saw what they had to go through. And so when we saw that, we said, oh, what a miracle that we could give him this extra time so he doesn't have to go through all the pain and hardship that these other children have to go through. And he was only in the NICU for 5 weeks instead of 4 months, or he'd probably have to be about 4 months if he had been born when my water broke. So that, to me, he still had tubes and monitors, but it wasn't nearly as much as it would have been. We had so many people say, we're praying for you. And that means so much more to us than when we hear people say, we're thinking of you. Because praying means that they are doing something that we can feel the power of, and we can feel that help. And there were times in the hospital when I sat there and I felt such an overwhelming sense of love and peace. When you pray for somebody, you're serving them, and that helps you as well. So our whole extended family, I think they all felt a sense of love for my child before he was even born.
We found out 2 weeks after he was born that I was getting laid off. It was a combination of a lot of things, including a big reduction in forces with my company. I had taken the bar, I had passed the bar, and they decided that they didn't want to hire another attorney. So I kind of overqualified myself out of my job, and they let me go. There was a huge blessing involved in that they were able to give me a pretty generous severance package, which included an extension of medical benefits through the end of the year, which, when you have a $250,000 baby, kind of carries and counts for a lot. So it ended up being a good thing in that respect. I was able to actually take a couple months off after he was born because of the severance and just hang out with my family, make sure that he was getting taken care of. For that month that he was in the hospital, I was able to go every day for extended periods of time every day. And I was able to help take care of Tianka without having to worry about going back to work or my productivity falling off. And so it's never a happy feeling to lose your job, but if that was going to happen, the timing of how and when it did, and the extension of the benefits that I got in my severance package made it so that it was a better experience than it otherwise could have been. But yeah, it's a difficult thing, balancing off my desire to actually fulfill my responsibility to provide for my family. So we're still waiting on kind of that one of the only missing things to make this kind of the most complete year in history. And as soon as I manage to get a job, I'll be able to a little bit see more the light at the end of the tunnel. Whereas right now I kind of feel like we're still riding this big emotional wave that has been this whole year.
Well, and I remember you saying when you told me that you were being let go, that you felt, because other times in the past when you've been let go, it's just been like this horrible, cankerous feeling. But then this time you kind of felt peaceful. You said, I don't know why, but I feel peaceful about this. And it's kind of crazy because it still hasn't come to what it's going to be yet, but you felt like the Lord does have a plan for us. We need to keep trusting with this as well. And that first month, it really was an amazing blessing, because I had to be at the hospital 2, 3, 4 times a day, especially when Gideon was starting to learn how to nurse. And to have Jeff be able to stay with TJ and not have to farm TJ out again, to me that was an amazing blessing.
I have a lot of friends who are very diverse, let's just say, who are very colorful. And I have a lot of friends who have fallen away from their faith. And for me, as I've gone through this experience, as I've gone through, and as I've seen other people go through similar experiences, spending so much time in the hospital, seeing so many people who are suffering, and there's the timeless question of why me? Why now? Why does this have to happen? And for me, in a lot of ways, it really comes down to a very basic question of, do I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God and the Savior of the world? Yes or no? If yes, then this is because of a plan. There is a purpose behind this. There is a reason that this is happening to our family. If no, then why would I curse God? Why would I not just say that accept this as a reality of existence? So for me, it's in many ways, it's that simple. The decision is, do I have faith or not? If I do, then let me actually have faith. Let me actually exercise that faith. Let me actually live my life as though it was life and not this horrible trial